Welcome, everyone, back to Tim's Vinyl Confessions and back to the Sammy Hagar deep dive. We are well into Sammy's 80s period, his successful run on Geffen Records. And I've got a special guest. You know him from Cretin Classics. You see him everywhere. Mr. Davey, how are you doing, sir?
Fine. Thanks for having me on again, Tim. I appreciate it.
Listen, when I ask Davey to come on, he's going to come prepared. This man has notes, pages and pages of notes. I've got I've got props. I've got props, is what I've got. Uh, so, what we're here to talk about is spoiler alert, my personal favorite Sammy Hagar album.
Really?
This is
Wow.
my favorite Sammy solo album. 1, 2, 3 Lock Box, 1982, his second album for Geffen. At a distance, you might think this is 38 Specials Rocket into the Night, but it is not. Here's the back cover. Guitar pick with the song titles written on it. And something that you kind of have to have the vinyl to notice. There's amps behind Sammy here, and there's like electricity running along the cables. You can't really see that on the other formats because it's too small and not enough detail. What other formats? Thought you'd never ask. Of course, we have a US cassette here. We have this kind of an older CD because this is when Geffen was still distributed by Warner Brothers. And of course, the Record Club only US Columbia House 8-track version
Nice.
of 3 Lock Box. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this album. I don't know where you stand on it. I guess the first thing I'll ask is what's your history with this album?
My history with this album is through rock radio, through New York rock radio, because there were 3 tracks from here played on the FM radio at the time on stations I used to listen to: WPLJ, which now is a top 40 station, unfortunately, and WNEW-FM, which is still a rock station. And they played 3 Lock Box, the title track, Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy, the big single, and Remember the Heroes was a big radio song. And oddly enough, even though it was a single, I don't recall hearing Never Give Up on the radio, which is unusual.
That is strange. We'll get to that in the track listing, but that's a mystery for a couple of reasons. There are a few mysteries around this album, and
Definitely.
yeah. So it came out late 82. So technically, Sammy had like 2 albums out in the same calendar year.
Yep, which is very unusual. It's 11 months because it came out December 6th. And Standing Hampton, which was when I first heard of him, because they played about 5, maybe, I think 5 songs on rock radio here in New York from Standing Hampton. So that was his big breakthrough album. He signed with Geffen, and it was probably the best thing he ever did up to that point with his career because it got him in front of a lot more people. Probably on the tours and definitely with radio airplay and probably video airplay too. Because Geffen had money.
The surprising thing about Standing Hampton is that there are no videos from it.
Wow.
That's surprising to me because Geffen was a very forward-thinking label. But and actually, there's only one real video from this album, and it's for the opening song, the title song.
That's so weird.
Think they'd have made a video for at least a couple other tracks, but so let's get into it. The title song. My history with this album kind of starts in, I'm going to say, about 1987, in so much as I heard Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy on the radio once. And, I was just kind of getting into music, and I wasn't sure whether it was a new Van Halen song. I know that might sound funny, but I was 13. So, my ears weren't, I just knew I recognized Sammy Hagar's voice. So I just wasn't sure if it was Van Halen or if it was a solo song. And I found out later it was one of his most successful solo songs. So I bought the cassette in early 1989, just randomly. Well, I talk about this in my Hagar book. It was so hard to find his Capitol stuff. The Geffen albums were pretty readily available. And by that point, I'd already had the 87 album, whatever you want to call it. And the next one on my list was 3 Lock Box, and I bought it, and I just listened to it over and over and over again. But I'd never heard any of the other songs on it. So when that a cappella opening comes on, I was kind of, oh, okay. Three Lock Box is a wicked song. It's got it's got some chops. You know, it's a fun drum song. The drum pattern is not your typical. It's in 4/4 time, but it's not your typical bass snare, bass snare. Like it's not your typical setup. It's some cool hi hat work in it, and I don't know. I think it's lyrically it's cool. I don't always understand what's about, but I know Sammy's into numbers and stuff like that, and he's talking about the Trinity and all this different stuff. But bottom line is the song rocks. What are your thoughts on Three Lock Box, the song?
It does rock. And the funny thing about this song is it's a misheard lyric by me. I'm famous for mishearing lyrics on songs by bands. A good example is when the Go-Go's first released Our Lips Are Sealed. My younger sister and I, we couldn't figure out what they were saying. We thought they were saying Honest Cecile, and they were talking about a friend of theirs, which is way different from Our Lips Are Sealed. And that's just one
Wayne
example.
on Wayne's World, they said Islands of Seals.
So I'm right in line with those guys. And a friend of mine used to call me Dark Garth, so it works out perfectly.
Oh, you what?
This song for years, because judging from the album cover and Sammy's usually overtly sexual lyrics, and we'll leave it at that, I thought he was saying, I want you, Three Lock Box. And I thought it was about, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And then recently I read that it's, well, first of all, I figured out listening to the album again over and over in prep for the show that it's 1, 2, 3 Lock Box.
Yeah.
And Sammy said it refers to the fact that when back in hundreds of years ago, when they used to take ships around the world, they would lock the treasures on the ship in a treasure chest. And there were 3 different guys with 3 keys to open it, so the queen's treasures wouldn't be stolen. And the way he saw that, he made that a parallel to like mind, body, and spirit. The 3 lock boxes, the 3 keys. So it's not even about what I thought it was about. I was way off with what I thought about this song. But you're right, it's a real riff rocker. And it starts off with the a cappella intro. And I like the guitar work on it by Gary Pill and Sammy Hagar. And David, I think, does he pronounce his last name Louser or Louser?
Yeah, Louser's how I've always heard it said.
Louser. Okay, Louser's drum work is good on the album and on this song especially. So I like this track, and I used to hear this on the radio. They probably played it because it's under 3.5 minutes long.
Yeah, what I like it packs a lot into its runtime. I mean, yeah, I've just got the CD in front of me, 322, and it's over and out, right? He does have some longer tracks on this album, but yeah, it's a really cool song, and lyrically, I don't think that Sammy gets enough credit for being a decent lyricist. I really don't.
I agree.
I really don't. I think that there's more to him than writing about women in cars or women in cars, preferably red cars, right? So yeah, I just think that I think it's a really cool song, and I agree. There's really good guitar work on it. I don't know if I don't always know when it's Sammy or when it's Gary Peel, but I think that whoever is playing the lead guitar, they're doing a fine job. I also really like the production. This is the second of 2 instances where Sammy worked with Keith Olsen. I think this is a good sounding album. I think the production on it's really good. I think the production on Standing Hampton was really good. I think this is just a little bit better because I like to think it's because it's the second time around working together, so they just gelled a little bit more. But yeah, I think it's a great way to start. It's a great way to start a great album. Now, not everything on this album is that heavy, but I think this is a fantastic start.
I agree.
Yeah. And now, so we have it kind of mellows out a little tiny bit, but I think it's a really cool song, Remote Love. What do you think of this one?
I have one little issue with this. Now, I like Alan Pasqua, who played the keyboards on the record. He was in the band Giant, who had that great record from, I think it was 1989, Last of the Runaways, with
That's
Dan
right.
Huff and his brother. And that's a great record. Love that record. Used to spin that all the time in the record stores. But his keyboard's here 20 seconds in. You get that synth line, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and it just dates this to the early 80s. Now, I like his keyboard work on most of the rest of the album. And on the first song, it's good because it's more in support. But when that synth, I like the intro guitar line, and the song is a nice little mid-tempo rocker, but just that one little keyboard part just alienates me. It just, it screams, this is the 80s. And
I
it's a
know what
bit
you
too
mean.
much.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I like it anyway. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, yeah, it's gonna like it nothing dates an 80s recording more than either really prominent bad keyboard sounds or electronic drums, like drum machines.
And the gated sound too. Yes.
Yeah. But I don't know. For some reason, I think that I think it works. There is one thing about this song that I comment about in my book. Now, I'm not a Ted Nugent fan, but I do know that his song "Free for All" starts off very similar to the beginning of Remote Love. Now, the songs are totally different after that, but I'm surprised over the years that Uncle Ted hasn't had a word with his buddy Sam about.
They are friends.
They are buddies, but that's that because I heard this song first, and then I heard "Free for All" many years later, and I go, why does that sound? Oh, it's Remote Love, but it's not. It's the other way around because, which is one of them came first. But I do like the song. I think I made the comment in the book that even though it's catchy and commercial and accessible, it's a bit complex for a single. It's got a lot of stops and starts. But other than that, I think it's a cool song. It's different, and sometimes I like it when Sammy does things differently. It's just, for the most part, you want to hear him rocking. You want to hear that hard rock.
Yep.
But when he does things different like this, I'm all for it.
It's catchy. It's good. It's just not a top tier tune on this album to me personally.
Yeah.
It's good.
Like, I think the album gets better. Like, it keeps going. It gets better, but I don't mind the song. Now, the next song, third track in the album, I think is really cool. It's not something I was expecting. And, cassettes, yeah, there's credits, but there isn't much for credits. And, chances are I was playing video games while I was listening to this. In fact, I'm almost positive I was, because that's usually what I did. I'd get Friday night, I'd get home from the record store, and And Remember the Heroes comes on. And all right, it starts out with some cool guitars. Sam sings, okay. And then the second half of the verse, and instantly I recognize that's Mike Reno from Loverboy.
Yep.
So I, get the cassette out, and well, would you look at that? It's a duet between Sammy Hagar and Mike Reno, and it's awesome. It's a great song. They sound really good together. And as we know, this would not be the last time that they would cross paths, because Loverboy opened a few shows in Canada on the 5150 tour.
Okay.
And just this year, Loverboy were the opening act for the Best of All Worlds tour, which I would have loved to have seen. I saw Loverboy last year, but anyway, I think it's a cool song, about the veterans, and it was also, let me see if I got this right. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Sammy co-wrote this song with Jonathan Cain, who had only just joined Journey, so he was like the new guy, and Cain also plays keyboards on the track.
And sings backing vocals too.
Yeah, and some of his keyboards, there's a little bit of that going on there, but I don't mind. I love this album. I got a soft spot for it. So, maybe maybe I can't be that objective about it, but I think it's a really cool song. And I've never heard anybody mention it, but it would have been cool if Sammy had done this on his last tour and Reno would come out with him, but maybe nobody thought of that.
Time.
Yeah, and it's not like it was a hit, but it just would have been cool because they're both there. But anyway, yeah.
Well, this was played on, at least on New York rock radio. This was a big song, which is unusual because it's a 6-minute song.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's that's unusual for Sammy. I mean, yeah, it's 5:58. I mean, yeah, it's a 6-minute
Yep.
song.
I mean,
It's kind of an epic.
To me, it's the centerpiece of the record, and it hit number 6 on the Billboard mainstream rock charts in 1983 because this
Yeah.
record came out December 82, so most of the charts are from 83 on it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I think
the mainstream rock charts started in 81, and then
right.
They a lot of Sammy songs did well on that chart. A lot of Van Halen songs did too. But yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Sammy had a ton of rock radio hits. And it makes
Yep, and
sense because I mean he made accessible music. You didn't necessarily have to play the singles. You could play album tracks and make them recognizable to people. It's really cool that you had access to stations like that.
so this was a big song for me, and this might be my favorite song on the record. It probably is.
It's pretty powerful. It's pretty good. I really like it. And then next up, of course, we have the highest charting solo song of his career. Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy. Got all the way to 13 on the Billboard Hot 100. It got to 19 in Canada, and that's quite significant because Sammy was basically a U.S. artist. Like his success was basically in the U.S. He did pretty good in the U.K. He actually did better in the U.K. with his Capitol stuff than he did in the States.
Yeah, it went nowhere here.
Yeah, but this song, he kind of said, "We're gonna." You know, I've always wondered because, as we know, in 1978, he wrote and recorded "I've Done Everything for You." Stiffed his version of it.
Right.
3 years later, Rick Springfield records it. It's stiffed. I don't know if people know this. It's stiffed on its first release. And then the next thing RCA put out was Jesse's Girl, which was a #1 song. Then they re-released I've Done Everything for You, and it went all the way to number 8. So I wonder if Sammy thought, I need to write another song like that. Just a straightforward pop rock song, just straight down the middle, hard not to like, pretty irresistible, and it worked. You know, it wasn't a top 5, it wasn't this huge across the board smash, but it was a solid radio hit. And like I said, I first heard it in 87, so it did get some recurrent airplay. And what I think is odd about this and what would have helped, why isn't there a video for this song? I think MTV played a live clip, but why didn't they made a concept video for Three Lock Box, which doesn't make any sense. And it's not like Geffen wasn't investing money into their artists for videos. It's just weird. Like MTV was so desperate for videos at this point in their first couple of years, they would have played just about anything was sent. And maybe they did play that live clip a lot, but I'm just surprised there wasn't a concept video done for the studio track.
It is unusual because Asia had a bunch of videos from their album same year.
Yep. 3, 4 an album. And look what, I mean, that album sold 5 million. So, and it's not like they were the most photogenic bunch of guys, but they had the video clips, you know? Yeah, it's kind of a mystery to me. And there's another song in this album I'm surprised didn't get the video treatment. But one of the strangest things when we're talking about this song and the album as a whole is that to this day, if you go on RIAA.com, it's still only certified as gold, and that was back in 83. Meanwhile, Standing Hampton, which came out before, went gold in its initial run, but over the years, in 92, it was certified platinum. VOA, as we know, was his first platinum album. So why is the album in between those two that contained his biggest hit still stuck at gold? I think Universal needs to rectify that.
It's a mystery, but they probably don't want to certify it because they don't want to pay him the money.
I'm going to say it again. If you could do if you watch enough of my videos, you'd get drunk if you took a shot every time I said this. Universal owes all of their artists after lying to them about the fire. Without a word, they should be going back and saying, yes, sir, we'll recertify your albums. We'll pay to have the bean counters count them or whatever they have to do. I have to think this album must be over 1 million sold in the States now.
That's what I think. That's what I've thought for years. It's a very odd conundrum. And a fast plug, if I may, a fast plug. I just did a show on Peter Kerr's channel, Rock Daydream Nation, where we discussed what MCA did to a lot of their rock artists in the 80s. So check that out. It's a very interesting video.
It is a great episode. I can attest to that. And yeah, a lot of my favorite bands fell victim to that. Absolutely. But yeah, they need to go back and fix that. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, you know, I grew up on the Canada-US border, so I bought a lot of albums in the States. I bought 2 copies of Free Lock Box long after 83, and I can't be the only one. So you know what I'm saying? Like there must be enough people to have, you know. But anyway, look, it's a great song, great pop song, and it did well. You know, it
reached
did
number 3 on the Billboard mainstream rock chart. So this song was all over. And when I've been playing the record over the last few days, my girlfriend Tia, who's not a huge hard rock fan, she said, I know that song. That sounds familiar, because it got airplay back in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was a huge single for him. And although there are a lot of keyboards here by Alan Pasqua, I like it in the context of this song. I think it works because it's a pure pop rock song, like you said.
Yeah. And again, I think Heath Olsen's production is just a good blend of everything.
And it's got hooks everywhere. It's got hooks, and you can just sing along or even whistle along with the keyboard part in the chorus.
Yeah, it's extremely catchy. Yeah, a little while ago, well, actually, it's been almost 2 years now on the Contrarians. Martin Popoff and I did a really funny episode where we built a concept album. And the concept album was, you know, Sammy Hagar doing an album, like a story about going into space. And the song from Free Lock Box that I chose is the side one closer, In the Room. I worked that into the story. This is a really cool song, and I think this is a song where the use of the right keyboard patches actually enhance the creepiness of the song, not take away from it. What are your thoughts on In the Room?
I agree. It's 3 minutes 42 seconds. I wrote it's an eerie mid-tempo groove rocker with some nice drum work from David Lauser, and the cool synth sounds to me were called Voices Carry by Till Tuesday, which actually came out 3 years later.
You are absolutely correct. Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It must have been whatever preset, you know.
And that came out.
Well, yeah, I never would have put that together before, but you're absolutely right. I get it.
And I wrote down this is a really good deep album track. I like this song.
Yeah. I like how they got his vocals kind of they got a little bit of flange on his vocals, so it has that sort of, and I think there's a whisper track. If you got headphones on, you know, no windows, no doors, like I think you can really hear. It's very atmospheric. It's a cool song, and it's sadly so many people don't get to hear these album tracks, you know, because who's going to know about them? Which is another reason that I did a book about his solo stuff. But yeah, I think it's 5 winning songs for 5. You know, maybe Remote Love is the straggler of the 4, or the 5, but
just
I think
a little bit.
I think that the album is you know, halfway there, and it's halfway all good. And what's really weird, and I think this is the only time he's ever done this, he kind of continues the theme into the opening track on side 2 again, which uses really cool keyboard parts. Because the opening line in Rise of the Animal is I just came out from the room. So he got out somehow. We don't know how. We don't know why he's in there, but he got out. What do you think about this song?
It's the second longest on the record, 5.5 minutes. And the first line in my notes I wrote, I like how Sammy connects side 1 with side 2 by saying I just came from the room with the opening lyric. And there's some nice power chords here, great cymbal crashes, and it's a good emphasis from his band on this song. And I wrote it's another good deep album cut that's not known by people, with nice guitar work by Gary. How did you pronounce his last name? Peel, like a banana?
I think it's Peel, like Peel.
Okay. Yeah, I put
because
nice
I've on one of the live albums he introduces his band. He's like Gary Peel.
Okay.
That's how I hear it anyway.
I've been saying Pill for decades. Who knew? Because I know
P-I-H-L. Yeah, I hear him say it as Gary Peel, but
okay. So I like the guitar work on this song from Sammy and Gary Peel too. They have some, I wrote down some slashing and stinging solos and the whole outro where you hear the lead guitar coming through. I just wish it were a little louder in the mix. It's a little bit too low.
I mean, Keith Olsen is a good pop rock producer. I mean, produced Fleetwood Mac and Rick Springfield. And you talked about MCA. He produced my favorite Night Ranger album, Man in Motion. He worked with Whitesnake. Sadly, he's no longer with us. Watch the documentary Sound City. They talk to Keith a lot on there. Yeah, I know what you mean. This blistering guitar, the down, 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 like there's some really fast, and some nice. What's the word I'm looking for? Not chromatic, but syncopated. Da 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 da. Like there's some really cool guitar work on this. Might be my favorite guitar song on the album.
I think that's Gary Peel. I have a different one, which we'll get to later.
Yeah.
But I think that's Gary Peel on the fast guitar parts.
Yeah. I mean, Sammy's a perfectly good lead player in his own right, but yeah. And he had and that's the other thing. He had a great band at this point. He had a fantastic band. No question. And what I like about this album too is it shifts gears. Because we've got those two darker, heavier songs, and then it's I Wouldn't Change a Thing, which this could have been a single.
That's exactly what I have written down.
It's just pure pop rock, and it's really good, but it doesn't sound jarring coming after Rise of the Animal because you just know it's Sammy.
And I just want to add on the last two songs I put down, those are two experiments that I feel work on this record. Tracks
Very much so, yeah.
In the Room and Rise of the Animal.
Yeah. And you know what? I like the fact that obviously Geffen let him do what he wanted to do. As anybody that's watched the earlier episodes, Capitol, they were giving him outside songwriter songs that didn't even fit his sound. They just didn't know what to do with them. But Geffen basically said, I have to think that, so he's got the legendary John David Kolodner as his A&R guy, and Kolodner's probably like, you just give me a couple of singles and then you can do whatever you want, So yeah, so he got on a basically a mainstream rock album on this huge corporate label. He gets to go a little crazy with those last two songs, and I don't think it's contrived. I just think he likes writing songs like this, like I Wouldn't Change a Thing, because it just seems natural to sound forced coming from him.
Right, and then he did it with Van Halen. He brought a commercial sheen to them.
Which is what Eddie wanted at that time. Yeah. So I'm surprised this wasn't a single. To me, this could have been a radio hit, like a top 40 radio hit.
Yeah, it's 3:19. It's under 3.5 minutes, which is the ideal length for a single, supposedly. I wrote down that this is the sleeper pop track on the album, and it should have been an emphasis track or a single. It's got a really catchy pre-chorus and an even catchier chorus. And I think Geffen should have released this as the follow-up to Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy. I feel they dropped the ball here.
Yeah, and usually Geffen, especially at this point, they just knew what to do. They knew how to handle this type of artist. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like it's got that short little intro that's perfect for a DJ to talk over. And these are all important things. It didn't even have a guitar solo, so it could have gotten AM radio play. And
right.
Nobody would have been. So yeah, missed opportunity. I really like the next track, Growing Up. Really like this one.
And I feel a little different on it.
Yeah. No, see, to me, this is that little bit of humor in his writing. There's only one thing about this song that if I had access to the original board mixes, I would fix. But you go ahead and tell me what you think of it. Yeah. Growing up. Da-na-na. Yeah. But
that's what I have written down. I said this song is 3:16, so it's another short song here. The whole album's 39 minutes long, by the way. I put down this song has some nice guitar work in it, but those fake hand claps, special effects date the song a heck of a lot to me. It's sort of, to me, on par with Remote Love, with that keyboard line, the synth line that just catches my ear and says, oh, this is from 1982, 1983, or 4. Just that sound to it. To me, it's not a highlight from the album.
I don't know. I really like it for, I like the attitude in it. I like the bridge in it, a little bit, some different chording going on. But you're absolutely right. There was no way to escape it. The hand claps were like one of the funniest things. I still think it's funny. I thought it was funny when I was 11 years old. Inside the credits of Bryan Adams' Reckless, they list under instruments beanbag, which must have been for sound effects. And actually,
There is a
yes,
credit on here.
Somebody named Patrick Gleason is credited as sound effects. I'm like, I'd really like to know more.
In my notes.
I'd really like to know more about that.
Probably these fake hand claps, this drum sound, synth. It's probably a synth thing. You probably just hit one key on the synth and you get the. Yep.
And if you kept your key,
that's the 80s for you.
Makes me wish I still had my old Casio. But so next up is, as far as I know, the only other officially released single from the album, "Never Give Up," which was it's credited to Alan Pasqua and Keith Olsen.
Yep.
But I have to think that they wrote it with Sammy in mind, because it's kind of all in house, right? It just sounds like something he would have written, and it's a great song. Peaked at number 46, but again, there's no video. So how could you expect it to get much higher? And the other thing is, this song's just as catchy, but you were saying you don't ever remember hearing this at a time when they were playing a lot of songs from these albums.
Yep. I mean, I can't remember every song, but this one didn't ring a bell when I started playing the record again. I mean, I bought the record used when I was first working in the record stores, probably in the late 80s. I got it on vinyl, and I'm sure I have it on CD somewhere from the early 90s. But I do not remember this song, which I thought was odd because it hit number 46.
For a song that almost hit the top 40, yeah. So for a certain amount of time, it must have gotten some airplay, at least on some stations.
That's what I was, maybe the Midwest or out west where Sammy's from in California.
Yeah, so I mean, the East Coast, Sammy Hagar has always said, until he joined Van Halen, the East Coast was always a tough sell for him.
And once Sandy Hampton came out, I heard his stuff on the radio all the time.
But apparently, he did even on VOA. He'd play not MSG, but he'd play like a fairly big place, and it'd be there'd be half attendance, and then the next night he'd play somewhere else, and it would be sold out. It's just. There were regional acts, right? And
definitely,
it's a weird thing. But yeah, Never Give Up. You'd think a song that almost hit the top 40 would have a little bit more staying power. But I remember, I mean, when I first heard this album, I only knew the one song. I knew I'd heard it on the radio. I didn't know how successful it was. But I remember years later getting a hold of one of Joel Whitburn's Billboard books, and reading that hit 46, that didn't surprise me. I'm like, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that they made that a single, but it just didn't work. And finally, we get, I don't know if it's the heaviest song on the album, but it's the fastest. I Don't Need Love. What are your thoughts on this one?
One thing before, on Never Give Up, it did not chart on the mainstream rock chart in Billboard.
That is strange.
Which lends credence to the fact that I never heard it on New York radio.
Yeah. Well, yes, if you had a station that was playing the songs which charted on mainstream rock, and it didn't play this song, and you didn't listen to a top 40 station, one of the top 40 stations that did play it, it makes sense that you wouldn't have heard it.
It's just very unusual.
Yeah.
And I like the next song, I Don't Need Love, which is written by the 4 band members: Bill Church on bass, Sammy Hagar, David Lauser on drums, and Gary Peel on guitar. And it's the shortest song on the record, unfortunately. It's only a smidge over 3 minutes, but this is a barn burner of a song to end the record. But that's the thing, the record ends, and I just wish there were a few more hard rock songs. I might take off Remote Love, and what was the other song I mentioned?
Oh, Growing Up.
Growing Up, and I would love to have some hard rock songs written by the band to replace those. And personally, to me, in my estimation, that would raise the album up. Because this is not my favorite Sammy Hagar record. It's very good. I'd give the overall album probably 7, maybe 7.5 out of 10. Because there are 2 other albums by him I like more, maybe 3. But it ends the album in fine style. I just wish there were more harder rock songs, but he makes up for it on the next record.
It's interesting because, yeah, there really are only about 4 out of the 10 songs on here that I would call hard rock songs.
Right.
Yeah. This song, the fact that it's credited to his whole band, I wonder if this started as a jam.
Well, that riff
Yeah.
is great. It's like a
Well,
circular riff.
that riff reminds me in a different key. Well, no, it's not in a different key. It's just different. But the way that it pulls off, it kind of reminds me of This Planet's on Fire. Because that's got that opus ring and like it's not all that different.
You're right.
And it's fast. You know, it's a fast one. You know, I like how it stops at like, yeah, it's a great song. And I think that Sammy obviously thought highly of it because when Geffen approached him to put out the Unboxed compilation in '94, he didn't even put Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy on it. He put
So
Three Lock Box and this song, I Don't Need Love. Those were the two songs from Three Lock Box. So if you only heard Unboxed, you might think Three Lock Box is a pretty hard rocking album from start to finish.
You're right.
Not quite the case.
And this was the B-side of where is it in my notes here? Of Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy. This was the B-side in the US, Spain, and Holland. So it was never going to be a single in America because it was a B-side.
Yeah. It would have been, you know, it's not heavy, but it would have been too heavy for a single.
For AM radio, yes.
Yeah, but I'm sure, you know, it would be the type of song that would be great in concert, great live. So that's the album, folks. That's Three Lock Box. But we're not done talking about Hagar songs from 1982 because I think that this is just a fun coincidence. And Davey asked me if I wanted to talk about the song. I said yes, because in my book, which I'll show here in a second, at the end of each album chapter, if there are any like stray songs that came out of that year that have something to do with Sammy, I talk about them at the end. And it just so happens that in 1982, Sammy ended up doing the title song from one of the biggest like teen coming of age comedies of the 80s, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It wasn't a single. I mean, the best what was the single off that album? That was like Jackson Brown, Somebody's Baby.
Somebody's Baby, which was number 7.
I mean, the soundtrack had some big names on it. It had who was on? I mean, Don Felder, Joe Walsh.
Most of the Eagles as
solo. Yeah, most of the Eagles, because I mean, I think that's because Irving Azoff had a lot to do with the soundtrack. But it's got, I think Billy Squier has a song on it that wasn't on any of his albums.
Fast Times, right?
Yeah, just called Fast Times. But Sammy gets Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Now, I think it's a decent song. I didn't hear it until, I don't think I heard it until like the advent of the internet, because I never saw the soundtrack anywhere. I think it's a decent rock song. It's kind of got like an I Love It Loud kind of drum beat, you know. It's simple. It's basic. I have a
different comparison I'll get to in a moment.
Oh, so what does it remind you of?
I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett.
Well, that too. Yeah, same type of thing. It's just that really simple thumping song. I think that it's decent in that I think Sammy did his best with the title that's kind of awkward to sing. You know,
it doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah, it's like Eddie Grant romancing the stone. It's like, boy, how are you going to make this catchy? But what I think is really funny about it is that anybody that knows Fast Times at Ridgemont High, one of the subplots of that movie was Spicoli, or maybe most of them, trying to get tickets to see Van Halen. And no one would have thought anything of it at the time, but now it's like, that's kind of funny. So
it is. Oddly enough, this was the soundtrack to Fast Times at Ridgemont High was on Elektra Records.
Yes.
Which is strange because Moving in Stereo by the Cars is featured in the movie from that scene we all know. Yet that song is not on the soundtrack, and the Cars were on Elektra.
That is very strange.
And then there's
you know, somebody might say, well, that's weird because not only was Sammy on that soundtrack, but he was also on the heavy metal soundtrack, which was also on Elektra.
Precisely.
But at that time, Elektra and Geffen, they all fell under the Warner Brothers umbrella. So I don't think it was as big a deal as it would have been a few years later.
That's why
So,
this song was actually the B-side of the US 7-inch for Never Give Up, which is very
okay, so
unusual.
that's cool because see, I like that. I like the fact that, you know, back then, like before the internet, if someone didn't have a one of those singles,
You didn't know about the song.
you didn't know these songs existed, right? It's like when
Right.
I found going back an album, I just in '89 I happened to stumble upon the 45 of I'll Fall in Love Again, and it's got Satisfied on the other song on the other side, which is a fantastic song, which has never been on CD.
And I've never even heard that song.
It's a you got to look at it. It's so good. It's a fast rocker, kind of like not as fast as I Don't Need Love, but it's a rocker. I think you'd really like it. Yeah,
Okay.
we're getting off topic though, but yeah,
But this song also reached number 21 on the mainstream rock chart, but I really don't remember hearing it. I think I know it
well,
from the movie more than
yeah,
being played on the
21 is like
radio.
some stations played it, maybe some didn't. I don't know. I don't. I'm not sure how they rank the songs, but um, I mean, it wouldn't have sounded out of place on Three Lock Box, but when I hear it, it doesn't sound like it was recorded at the same time. To me, it doesn't have the same production sound.
I can see that.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure where this fell. Obviously, it was out by the time that the Never Give Up single was released, but yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I find it all very fascinating to chronicle this stuff, and that's one of the things that I love about the Essential Red collection that Universal put in 2004, because it gathers up those soundtrack songs.
It's on. I was just going to say it's on there. That's the last thing in my notes.
So you don't have to go searching, you know, high and low to find these, because that's another thing. And I don't know, it wouldn't be the case with all of these, but some of those soundtracks from the 80s, some of them were never issued on CD. So there you go, folks. That's Three Lock Box. Well, you got anything more to say about Three Lock Box?
That's it.
I think we have both agree to differing degrees. It's a great album. It's a pretty user-friendly album. It just happens to be my favorite. It was among one of the first that I heard. So I've been living with this one for, I don't know, 35 years. So,
and I go back about 40 plus years with it. I was there when it was getting airplay on the radio.
That's awesome.
I'll give it a 7.5. What would you give it? The whole album?
Oh, I'd give it a 10.
Okay.
It's a 10 for me. I think it's a very likable album, and I think it's an effortlessly enjoyable album. But you know, 7.5 is a decent grade. And we all hear it differently, which is cool. So folks, don't forget, subscribe to Cretin Classics. I'll have the link below. Davey's always got some great content, and he's always popping up on some of the same shows as me, as he already mentioned, Peter Kerr's Rock Daydream Nation. So we make the rounds. And don't forget, Red on Black, Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar, link to order below. Exhaustive look at Sammy Hagar's solo career, as is this deep dive. And we're going to have Davey back, but it's going to be for a much later album. In the meantime, thank you, sir, for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
And go listen to Three Lock Box, folks. We'll see you later. Tim's Vinyl Confessions.